Okay, so I mentioned that sometimes we overreact to stuff, and I'm okay with admitting that. But you get your beliefs, and then when you see something that you really buy into that kind of supports it, and I had a belief that George Pickens would be a great pick for the Lions. I also have a belief that Brad Holmes does a great job building a roster through the draft. And it's pretty interesting because right now Pickens is going through it, man, in Pittsburgh because his commitment to the game is being questioned. There was a terrible play for him in that game against Indianapolis this weekend where he was downfield and didn't put in any effort to block at all. None. The video's actually embarrassing. I think it would get a lesser player cut. And I don't know, in a town like Pittsburgh, in a football town like Pittsburgh, I'm not sure you recover from that. And I don't want to overstate the fact that I don't know what's being said, but as an outsider looking in, that's a tough highlight for a player to just give up on a play, not block downfield. The guy he didn't block makes a tackle, and then as they're rolling towards it, he jumps out of the way. And he said he didn't want to get hurt. And he did tear his ACL. But he crossed paths with our guy who had a torn ACL. George Pickens, a couple years ago, in the spring game at Georgia, or in the spring practice, I don't know if it was a spring game, but he tore his ACL. And he worked very hard and actually made it back late in the year for Georgia and played in the national championship game against Alabama. In that game, he played against Jamison Williams. And in that game, Jamison Williams tore his ACL. So you have two of these elite, talented wide receivers from the Southeastern Conference, both with torn ACLs. Both guys that got talked about by us here at the station and fans as being potential players to be drafted by the Detroit Lions. I probably, in retrospect, made a bigger case for George Pickens to be drafted than I did Jamison Williams to be drafted. It seemed like the Pickens where he was going to be available kind of more aligned with what Detroit was trying to do. And, of course, Detroit made a trade to move up to get Jamison Williams. So I don't think we talked about it all that much. But Pickens is justifiably being criticized for not being dedicated to football. His head coach came out and didn't defend him, said obviously he has room for continued improvement. That's one of the examples that I'm talking about in terms of still obvious a room for improvement. In the meantime, okay, player coming off torn ACL, trying to preserve himself a little bit. Not our guy. Our guy, that Brad Holmes traded up and took, he has never shied away from contact. In fact, in many ways, the earliest way he got on the radar and really started to change the narrative over concerns about Jamison Williams with the gambling suspension, some of the social media posts that made some people uncomfortable. How did he start turning it around? It was blocking. It was what George Pickens doesn't seem to want to do. He went out there and made an impact early on blocking downfield this year. Enthusiastically blocking downfield and effectively blocking downfield. And because of that, people started mentioning him, noticing him. We in Detroit take the littlest things, and we can turn you into a star if you show us you'll do the dirty work. And that's why the grind line becomes heroes in Detroit and why Ben Wallace became a hero in Detroit. Jamison Williams is going to do more than just the little things, but it was his willingness to do something that seems like we shouldn't even have to give a player credit for. And then when you see somebody else's young receiver unwilling to do it, I got to tell you, I Feather in the cap of our organization once again. Because two players, similar boat, coming off a torn ACL, our guy gets on the radar doing what their guy doesn't seem to want to do. And I wouldn't give up on Pickens if I were a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I would just hope that he grows up professionally.